It's nice to see all of you. I'm very honored that you guys are all coming here, be it either for free food or to listen to God's story and me. I'm thankful to see so many faces in the room. Stan asked for me to share my testimony with you guys because of its wild/unique nature. I think this is actually the first time I've formally shared my testimony at SCF. And so I think because of that, because some people know me quite well and have known me for a long time, and some people, this may be the first time you've actually spoken to me in a little bit of a longer capacity, I'm going to kind of make sure that we're all on the same playing field so I can tell the story. A few goals that I have for this, like why am I doing this? Sometimes I feel like testimony sharing is, I don't want it to be just a time for me to inflate something that God has done in my life and like try to elevate myself. And so a few things that I have is that, first of all, I want you to glean from this testimony how God can use you to put you in moments for the sake of furthering the kingdom. I think this story is a story of God in my life. However, this story would not have happened if it wasn't for faithful people like you giving God their yes. In addition to that, I think I want you to just appreciate that whenever you give God your yes, it's not just an immediate action that is changed, but it's a butterfly effect or a domino effect. You can give God your yes for something, and 5 years later, lives are still being changed because of it. And I say that in light of the mission trip, but also in light of everybody's paths and professions that they've chosen, is that like giving your God yes on a daily basis is going to be what leads to these massive ripple effects through time. You may not necessarily see it, but that doesn't mean that they're not there. Stan asked me to keep this under 40 minutes, and that's a Stan goal. And then a personal goal is for me not to cry. So we'll see if all of these things are achieved. So I wanted to ground this talk, or my story, in a particular scripture. And whenever I go on mission, Romans 10, 13 and 15 is kind of something that I carry with me. And I carry it with me just through my day-to-day life, and also the people that evangelize me and pour into me, I think, are living embodiments of this verse. And so it says, this is Paul talking about how people will come to be saved. And he says, for everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. But how then will they call on him whom they have not believed? And how are they to believe in him of whom they have never heard? And how are they to hear without someone preaching? And how are they to preach unless they are sent? As it is written, how beautiful are the feet of those who preach the good news. And right now, all of us in this room are people that are constantly being sent on a day-to-day basis. If you are going on the mission trip, you're being sent on that. But if you're not, every single interaction you have is an opportunity to be sent out in God's mission field. Your job, truly, is to faithfully respond with a yes and do what the Lord asks of you. I think that's a really difficult thing. So, some stuff about me so that we're all on an equal footing. I have been a bondservant to Jesus Christ in 3 days it will be 6 years. So you may ask, well, what was prior to 6 years ago like? I was an atheist from 8 to 20. I was raised in a Catholic household, very much knowing I think I knew who Jesus was, but I did not know Jesus well, okay? I had a lot of head knowledge of biblical truths, but none of them had really made their way into my heart. And I think that the faith that was practiced in my family was largely lukewarm. It came crashing down whenever I was around 8. Around that time, some of you may know, my family experienced like tragedy after tragedy after tragedy. We lost our home in the housing market collapse and were unhoused. My parents divorced. And then in light of that, my dad actually developed FSGS, focal segmental glomerulosclerosis. And for those of you that may not know what that entails, he had like sudden end-stage renal disease. And so he started to die. And in the midst of all that, in the midst of this divorce, my dad kind of stepped away from my life completely. And so as we were struggling to find, housing for my mom, who was a stay-at-home mom, to figure out how to put food on the table, us actually seeking aid from the Catholic Church that we went to and being denied and turned away, I felt very rejected, not only from my physical father here on earth, but from my one in heaven as well. I saw my mom spend a lot of nights in prayer for help and for aid, and I felt like I didn't see it. And so I was like, if this is the same God that is supposed to care for the birds of the trees and the flowers of the field, then I don't want any part of him. And so from 8 to 20, I was an extremely dedicated atheist to the cause. What do I mean by that is, like, I loved to argue faith, because I was intellectual. And so one of my biggest triumphs was whenever I could make someone stumble in their faith from like a philosophical or a theological standpoint. And I really hated seeing faith being lived out in motion. It made me sick to my core. And so I think this is a time in my life and when I would say I'm a true enemy of the gospel. This is Gabriel in 2018, 2019. I know what you're thinking. Yes, I always looked this good. You see a totally happy, well-adjusted guy. Those were legal at the time, so I'm not putting up anything that's against Southwestern's values. And the things that I can't show, I did not show. But you see a guy that's perfectly healthy and happy on the outside, but this is the time in my life where I would consider myself a dead man walking. I truly do not recognize this man. When I look back in pictures of my life, I was truly a slave to sin. I was addicted to pornography. I was engaging in premarital sex. I was using substances to cope with the stressors of my life. I was actually contemplating dropping out of school. And at this time in my life, I actually had contemplated suicide as well. So I was really dark. I was in a really dark place, and I was very directionless. I hated my time at Baylor in the beginning. I had no idea what I was doing. I had no idea why I was even there. And I was just really struggling to find some footing. By God's grace, I met someone by the name of Kyle Langston, who you guys may have met. He's about to be a third-year emergency medicine resident at UNC. And Kyle saw me for the mess that I was, and in an academic sense, he offered me a lot of support because I was flubbing everything. And he sat me down one day towards the end of my freshman year of college, and he said, okay, I'm going to give you the opportunity to help with this class that he was teaching. And he was like, because I see that there is a lot of potential in you, but to do that, you're going to have to shape up. We're going to have to change some things. And first of all, I was like, okay, well, first of all, who are you to speak to me like this? You don't know me. But I rolled with it, and I was pre-med at the time, even though I wasn't really dedicated to it, but I was like, I'll just take any opportunity I can get. I think this is the first example of someone giving the Lord their yes. Kyle did not have to extend that opportunity to me. Quite frankly, I don't think I was very deserving of it, but he did anyways. And so what that did was it placed me in the perfect position for the following year for the Lord to really start to make some waves in my life. So the following year, I'm part of this class. He's a senior right now, or he's a senior at this time. And I get approached by him and another gentleman, a professor, Dr. Marty Harville, who ran the course. And they both looked at me and they said, hey, we're thinking of going on this medical mission trip over spring break to Belize. Do you think that'd be something you'd be interested in? And when I heard those words, my brain blocked out the mission trip part of it. I just saw the word medical, and the pre-med in me started foaming in the mouth, right? And I was like, you mean I can do some things that maybe I should or shouldn't do in a foreign country? I'm sold. And so I was just I was like, you know what? I can skirt by and just negate all the Christian stuff. Let me just come on this medical trip. This is a medical trip for me. And so I signed up for it. And I think that's a second example of someone giving the Lord their yes. Somebody had to, bring that trip up to both of them. His name was Luke. Not that Luke. Luke Riordan, something like that. Second, they had to then look to me and approach me and ask me if I was willing to do it. Okay, so now we have two instances of someone giving the Lord their yes when they may or may not have wanted to, or they maybe didn't know if it was the right move. I signed up for this trip. I'm like, well, maybe I'll just, like, I don't even know if I'm going to fundraise for it or not, because I certainly can't afford to pay for this trip. But with God's providence and God's grace, I actually ended up fully fundraising this trip. So that was a score. And I remember the days leading up to when we were supposed to go out and be sent, we were all meeting, and everyone is, like sharing their name, where they're from, when they got their last haircut, and why they were coming on this trip. And everyone said a very similar answer. Everyone on that trip, I think, was very firm believers. And, everyone wanted to be the hands and feet of Jesus. Everyone wanted to serve as the way that the Lord did in this time on earth. And then it got to me, and I was the last person on this introduction line. And I said, look, my name's Gabriel. I'm from Houston. My last haircut, I think at the time, was like 2 months ago. And I was like, I'm going to be honest with you guys. I am coming on this trip purely to do medical work. I do not care about the faith. I have no intention of sharing your faith. And I'm purely here just to get some hours in. I was like very blunt, to the point, honest with them. And everyone was kind of like, oh, okay. Who let him in here? But there was the man that led the trip. He was a ear, nose, and throat surgeon. His name is Jeff Dyer. He looked at me, kind of saw me from across the room. He was like, okay, I'm glad, I'm happy you're here. So, we go on the mission trip. These are some pictures that I have for you to look at. I did a lot of sleeping on that trip. I was constantly exhausted. You'll notice here, there's something really funny. What are you not seeing in any of these pictures?
A cigar.
A cigar.
No cigars.
Medicine.
No medicine. Do you want to know why there was no medicine on this trip? Does anybody remember what was happening during the week of March 13, 2020? A little virus was brewing in Wuhan, China, and it was starting to make its way across the world. And we just happened to be stuck in Belize during that time.
Wow.
And nobody knew what the heck was going on, and everyone thought that anybody that sneezed or coughed was capable of killing them. So now I'm in this foreign country surrounded by a bunch of freaking Christians, and I am not even doing the one thing I came on this trip for. Could you imagine my disbelief? I was aghast. I look back at this and I'm like, God, you are so funny. You have such a great sense of humor. So that immediately, day one, stripped away from me. And so I'm sitting here and I'm like, great, what am I supposed to do? And I think it's best to split this trip up into 3 parts. There's the beginning of this trip. This is very revolutionary. There's the middle of this trip. There's the end of this trip. And I want you to appreciate, this is not necessarily about the work that I did on the trip, but the people on this trip that God so intentionally brought and He used to bring me to faith, okay? Each one of these people, I want you to think of, had to give the Lord their yes to come, had to give the Lord their yes to speak to me, and to see that through faithfully. So these yeses are like compounding on one another, right? So, beginning of the trip, I barely know these people. These people barely know me. The only thing they know is that I am very anti-Christian. So much so that I refused to buy a Bible for this trip because I was like, I'm not going to use my hard-earned money on something so useless. And so Kyle actually snuck a Bible into my backpack so that I could have for this trip. It was a King James Bible. I barely believe that that's English, but I had a Bible. Day one of the trip, I kid you not, we are not 20 minutes into Belize. I'm in a van with a bunch of strangers. One of them, Luke's mom, actually turns around and looks at me dead in the eyes, and she goes, the Lord is telling me to ask you about your family. How's your family? What's your relationship like with your family? Do you have any hard difficulties with any of them? And I'm like, woman, I don't know you. I just met you. What are you doing asking me? Then she goes, actually, I feel like I really want to know about your dad. And I was like, okay, whoa, pause. You're not asking me about that. That is like off limits, line in the sand. And already she is picking at me and asking me these questions, and I feel like this dread like welling up inside me with each time she asked another question, because I'm like, please stop. I'm like very unhappy with the way that you're approaching this. But and then literally immediately after that, we get there, and so another person on the trip is sitting me down and is asking me just about why I came, like what I hope to gain from this, and is really just trying to get a better understanding of who I am. And honestly, I was struggling because I was like, I don't really know why I'm on this trip anymore. Like, I've felt like directionless since the moment we took off from DFW. And these things basically start to pile onto one another. We were tasked at the beginning of the trip to pick a song, a worship song, for an event that was going to be midway through the trip. It's called Hymn Time. Why I'm explaining this to you is because it's important. Hymn Time is basically a time where people picked a worship song that was very personal to them, that usually spoke to their testimony, and in that they shared why they picked it. And it was usually a very vulnerable time, a time where people kind of laid themselves out in the like purest, most unprotected way they could. And it was a time of reverence and worship. It was also a time that I was dreading because I don't know any worship music. I have no idea what I'm going to say to these people. And so while everyone else is getting their songs in left and right, like some people had their songs in before the trip even started, because pre-meds, I'm sitting over here waffling, spinning my wheels. Beginning of the trip, really, we're serving in a school. I'm teaching science modules to kids and showing and playing with them. And I'm not doing any evangelism. I strictly was like, don't ask me to share a verse. Don't ask me to tell a Bible story. I'm not doing any of it. Wednesday, now we're midway through the trip, I have to pick a song for Hymn Time. Still have no idea what I'm going to do. For the last 2 days, I've been up every night till like 1 a.m. on my phone looking up deep Christian songs on Google. Nothing came up. Deep Christian songs, deep worship songs, serious Christian songs, nothing. And through this time, I'm feeling directionless, I'm struggling, I feel like I'm regretting every single decision that has brought me to this moment, and all I want to do is like hop on the first available flight to go home. As I'm scrolling through Google the night before Wednesday, I land on a song. I don't know if anybody's heard it. It's called "I Will Rise" by Chris Tomlin. Anybody? I see some head nods. Sure. Great. I put that song on, and I kid you not, in the first 20 seconds of that song, immediately I burst into tears. And some of you may know I am a crier, but I don't even think he had started singing yet. Like, I genuinely just like, the song started, and I was just bawling my eyes out. And I listened to it, and then I listened to it again, and then I listened to it again and again and again. And I fell asleep listening to it looping on Spotify. And I woke up the next morning, and I said, I don't even know what just happened, but this is the only song that actually elicited something from me, so we're going to pick it. I put it in, and immediately after breakfast, another person, her name is Kayla Camlighter, but now she's married, and I don't know her new last name. She immediately grabs me, whisks me aside. Gabriel, I saw you put in your Hymn Time song. What was that about? And I looked at her, and I was like, I don't know. I just liked it. And she was like, well, do you think it said anything to you, or do you think it spoke to you? And in my head, I'm like, no, it didn't speak to me. It just made me sad. But she was like, no, I think you picked like a really interesting song. Is there anything that you would use to describe it? And I remember telling her that I thought it felt freeing. And she looks at me, and she had like really, really blue eyes, and she just goes, how do you feel about your faith right now, or your lack of faith right now? And then I looked at her and I said, well, there is no faith right now. And she looks at me again, and she says, okay, on 5 o'clock on Friday, I'd like for us to circle back and revisit this. And mind you, this girl's gorgeous. And so I'm literally like, whatever you say, beautiful blonde woman. Like, I was like, if it gets me to speak to you again, I will confess faith right now. So I was like, okay, whatever you say. 5 o'clock on Friday, we'll revisit this lack of faith. The day went on. I didn't think anything of it. Hymn time comes around, and this is a very solemn, like very reverent time. I had already decided I was going last. And I decided that I was going to say 3 minutes max, shut up, close my eyes, be done with it. The night goes on. This thing is lasting for hours. And it gets to me. And I open my mouth. And I don't remember a lick of what happens next. I come to find out I spoke for like 20 minutes. All about my life, the weight that I had been carrying for the last, like 11, 12 years, how frustrated I was with the Lord, feeling like frustrated with my dad leaving us, how I like this song because I just felt like Christians are so carefree and so joyous, and how I just never experienced joy like I've seen Christians experience joy, and just how desperately I wish that I could live a life that Chris Tomlin was describing, of this freedom and this just really, I guess, like weightlessness that comes from what he's describing. I'm in tears, and everybody in the room, which is like 25 people, are all coming, basically like swarm me. I can barely breathe, and is praying over me. I don't even hear the lyrics of the song because people are just praying and calling out to God for me, and just trying to pray healing and sight to see the Lord, and intervention from the Lord's behalf. And I walked out of hymn time that night, and I marched straight to my room. Oh, and I left my journal, but this was the first journal that I completed. I hadn't written anything of substance that whole trip. I kind of just been like writing like scribbles and uselessness to pretend like I was journaling. And I go and I just go March 10th, 11th, 2020, and I say, tonight, for the first time in my life, I felt God and the Holy Spirit in this room. And I went to bed. The next morning I wake up and I look at what I read, and I'm like, Gabriel, you must have been on crack. Like, there's no way that you wrote that and you genuinely believed it. And I was really wrestling with that all day, of just like, why did I write that? Why am I feeling like that was something in my gut that came from a place of truth? And what do I do about it? And I was really wrestling with it back and forth all day. And then midway through the day, we are sharing the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And I remember, for the first time in the whole trip, I actually was interested in what the people had to say. Like, I was over here like, oh my gosh, they jumped in the fire and they didn't burn up? Well, that's crazy. God was with them, like he was physically with them in the fire. Like, and what happened next? And I was like so gobsmacked by this story that when I was sitting there listening to people speak on it, all of a sudden, like, I had probably one of the strongest moments of clarity in my entire life. I seldom have these moments of clarity. It was like the skin on the back of my neck stood up. Like, my whole body just got like goosebumps. And then it clicked for me that I was like, oh my gosh, Gabriel, every single moment in your life has led you to this right now. God has brought you here so that you can be faced with him, and so that you can encounter him, and it can challenge you to leave behind the life that you've been living. And when that moment happened for me, and that following night, we discussed the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, and I had to be physically met with the story of how Jesus was crucified, and the pain that he was dealt, and the wounds that he received on my behalf that were then nailed to the cross. I was like, that's it. I think I know why I'm here, and I think it's to become a Christian and to change my life. I immediately go to the person leading the trip, Jeff, and I look at him, I sit him down, and I say, I want to believe, and I know that this is why I'm here, which is to be a Christian. And he looks at me and goes, okay. And he starts talking to me about it and starts telling me, just what that means, and if I have an understanding of what it means to be saved by grace through faith, and how that there's nothing that I could have done to be changed this. And I told him, I was like, look, I understand that. I hear what you were saying, and I'm telling you, my soul wants this. And then he was like, okay, well, when we get home, we can talk about you being baptized, you can do all that. And I said, look, no, you don't understand. I don't want to spend another minute or second of my life being a non-believer and being unbaptized. I want to do this as soon as possible. And he goes, okay. Well, we can see we can see what we can do about that. And I remember the enemy reached out and kind of grabbed me and made me start feeling all these feelings of guilt. And because I was like, oh my gosh, I was baptized as a baby. What is my mom going to think about this? And I remember I called her and I said, Mom, I explained to her what's been going on this trip. And I told her, and in summary, I was like, Mom, I think I want to be baptized again, and I want to be a Christian. I want to be a believer. What do you think about that? And my mom was dead silent. And I thought we lost the call, and I was like, hello? And she goes, Gabriel, from the day you told me that you didn't believe in God anymore, I prayed every single day that you would believe in him again. And she was like, if this is what you believe the Lord is telling you to do, I support it 100%. And I was like, okay, we were full speed ahead. So now it's Friday, March 13th, 2020, my baptism day. Funny enough, where we were staying didn't have a place to baptize me. And so already the enemy was trying to cause problems. That was our excursion day too. So we weren't even going to be like anywhere near like acceptable places to baptize, I guess, is for a lack of a better word. Our excursion was to these like Mayan pyramids, which was gorgeous. And to do that, we had to cross a river to actually get to where like the pyramids were. And so we frolic all day, doing whatever. I was exhausted. But in my head the whole time I'm like, I still really want to be baptized today. Like I still really want to be baptized today. Like I don't care if anything else happens. If I'm not baptized today will be the worst day ever. And we crossed the river to head back, and we're waiting on the bus. And I look at Jeff and I say, can we do it here? He looks at me and goes, actually, yes. And so, we had kind of like beach stuff that we had done before. So people, had like swimsuits and stuff on hand, and they had brought them because there was water to places we were going to. And so everyone kind of had their swimsuits on underneath, and we all get in the water, and we have my baptism. And I'm going to play this for you, and then I'm going to tell you the coolest part of the story, which I think is just the thing that sold it all together for me. But let's see. Can you hear it?
Do you realize that by calling on your Lord, that you're signing up right now to die to yourself every day for the rest of your life and give him veto power and put him on the throne of your life? Do you acknowledge that it is by grace that you've been saved? Not by anything that you've done, by just faith in Jesus Christ and what he did on the cross for you and me? And Gabriel, my brother, it is my honor and privilege to baptize you today on March 13th, 2020, in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
And then I received my second baptism of the day. And then they immediately tried to send me to heaven because I stayed under the water for a very long time. And so in that moment, heaven rejoiced. It was a beautiful day, honestly. The sun was shining and it was kind of cloudy. Honestly, God set up the aesthetics quite well for that.
Is that Abel?
Yeah.
I was gonna say, yeah, no.
Yeah, that's Abel. Yeah, I know. I hope they appreciate me just like putting them on blast, like in their swim trunks and stuff. But the big guy that tackled me was Kyle. So my baptism finishes. I am reborn, right? The man that you saw smoking cigars is dead, gone. And the world and my life is better off for it. And so my baptism is done, and I'm coming out, I'm drying myself off, and Kayla, the beautiful blonde girl, is like on the shore crying. She's crying. And I look at her and I'm like, okay, like it was beautiful, but it wasn't that beautiful. Like there's no reason for you to be crying this much. And she like basically runs over to me and I think shows me probably the coolest part of this entire story. And it's the part that, to this day, like it gives me shivers when I tell people about it. So on iPhones, I don't know if you know this, but whenever you record a video and you look to see, if you look at the top of the screen, it'll tell you when the video started, okay? So the video of my baptism starts at 4:58 p.m. on Friday. And the exact moment that I get dunked in the water is 2 minutes and 21 seconds into the video. So at 5 o'clock on Friday, in 21 seconds, I was baptized. And so she looks at me dead in the eyes and she goes, Gabriel, it's 5 o'clock on Friday. Are you ready to talk again about your faith? And I go to a global pandemic. I read John. It took me 6 months, but I did it. And I learned what it meant to be a Christian. And we started a Bible study. And we got to meet some really incredible people in it and share Jesus to them as well. We baptized and we preached. And honestly, truly, the only reason why I'm sitting in front of you today is because of the men and the faithful men and women that gave God their yes to bring me on this trip and to pour into me the way that Jesus poured into them. So I leave you with this. This is one of my favorite verses in Scripture from Colossians. And it's something that whenever I feel like worried if my seeds were scattered on poor soil, or whenever I feel like I'm losing sight of what matters, I am reminded of the weight of my sin and of the one who bore it all for me. And I encourage you, if you haven't thought about it today, to think about that and how loved and forgiven you are, that Jesus took all of your sins and died on the cross for you and was resurrected. That's all. Thanks, everyone. It was under 40 minutes.